because this keyword went here, that means that this keyword is going to go there. No. Like different keywords are going to land differently depending on the decision that's being made. Because what I tell my students is that the funnel, or the customer journey, or however you want to describe it, it describes a decision-making process. And that decision-making process is going to look different depending on the decision being made. So if you're planning a family reunion or a vacation, that's going to look very different than if you're deciding whether or not to throw that extra pack of ice cream in your Instacart.
Welcome to Endless Coffee Cup, a regular discussion of marketing news, culture, and media for our complex digital lifestyle. Join Matt Bailey as he engages in conversation to find insights beyond the latest headlines and deeper understanding for those involved in marketing. Grab a cup of coffee, have a seat, and thanks for joining.
Hey, welcome, dear listener, to another episode of the Endless Coffee Cup. And I'm so excited this episode because I received a book this week that I had to plow through. I couldn't put down because I felt like I was talking to a kindred soul reading this book. And so I went to introduce to you T. Adeola, and he has written a book straight out of context, and wonderful book, and it's so timely because right now within this industry, within the digital marketing industry, there's such a debate about the value of a college or university education. So T, hey, give us a quick introduction about yourself and what was it that made you want to write this book?
Well, thanks so much for that, Matt. I greatly appreciate that. You got me all warm and fuzzy on the inside. It's always great to have somebody else talk about you because you're like, wow, that sounds really good.
It does, doesn't it?
The long and short with me is that I actually drank the young college Kool-Aid when I was a young person. I graduated high school almost 20 years ago, and I cannot believe I am old enough to actually say that next year is going to be my 20-year reunion. But for the first decade, I was just Googling it. So I like to tell people I took the longest gap year ever, and my gap year turned into a gap decade. I graduated in 2002 and went back for my bachelor's in 2012. And in the preceding decade, I did it all. So what was happening is that, unfortunately, I ran into name discrimination as I entered the workforce. And I found a difficult time finding employment because some of the HRs, they'll take one look at your name, and if they can't pronounce it, they'll just delete your application. So once I found out that this is what was happening, I was like, well, screw that. I'll just go online and make money. And so that's what I typed into Google, how to make money online.
All right.
And then I found myself in the clutches of the folks selling lotions, potions, and all the other, work from home sort of things. And I learned a lot. That's not to be disparaging, but it wasn't quite as advertised. Let's put it that way.
Right.
And so I did that for literally a decade, and then I started a family and decided that I needed to do better for my child. And then I got serious and got enrolled in a degree for digital marketing at Full Sail University. And I remember how I got there. So I got hustled by Shannon Doherty, right? So I think I was driving a forklift at the time. And I just got off, and it was like, 3 o'clock in the morning. So I'm sitting on the couch winding down. And then, Shannon Doherty, a commercial comes up, and she's in her pajamas. She's like, hey, I'm in my pajamas, and I'm going to school, and you can too. I'm like, what's up, Piper? You know what I'm saying? She had just got killed off of Charmed. I think I might have been watching Charmed at the time, actually. And
they know their audience. That's great advertising.
Indeed. And so she pops up and she's like, hey, I'm going to school in my pajamas. You should too. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. I should do that. And so I found my way to Full Sail. And what I found refreshing about Full Sail University's degree offering is that it was an accredited degree program. It wasn't a certificate or just another program. No, this is an actual Bachelor's of Science degree. And so I did that. And then I graduated in 2015. And from there, I worked at Cox Media Group in Atlanta. I was an SEM campaign manager. So Cox Media Group, they're a media conglomerate. They own television stations and newspapers. So the same small businesses you'd see advertised in the evening news or the Sunday paper, they just took that ad spin and put it on Google. And then from there, bounced around a few small boutique agencies. Then I came back up north to Dayton, Ohio, where I'm from. And something I swore I would never do, by the way, because the winter I went down south, I went down to Atlanta, which was 2015. We had 2 weeks, not a continuous 14 days, but 2 separate weeks where the temperature did not get above zero. So it was sub-zero the entire week. And I think the coldest was like -20. It was a terrible winter. I was like, I am never coming back up here. And then 3 short years later, here I am. Then I found myself at ACCO. ACCO Brands, they own most of the brands in the office and school supply space. So Mead, 5-Star, Trapper Keeper, Daytimer, At a Glance. And then from there, I got poached to See Me Beauty, which is one of P&G's newer brands. And it's cosmetics for ladies who remember the 80s, a.k.a. 50 plus. But they don't like to be called 50 plus in advertising. They prefer 80s girls. So here I am, this big burly black man, schlepping cosmetics for middle-aged women. And yeah, that's been my journey.
Oh my goodness. Because now that's like my age group there. I went to high school in the 80s, and that is, I know exactly the cosmetics you're talking about, because that was like the height of hair and cosmetics. It just, man, that's one thing that fascinates me about digital marketing is the clients, the industries you get into that you never imagined you would ever interface with. And all of a sudden you become an expert about this little niche, and the variety of businesses you get exposed to is just incredible.
It is. And it's, as you well know, digital marketing is a space for lifetime learners. And I learned a lot. It was great from a content marketing perspective because, I'm not a woman, let alone a 50-plus-year-old woman. So I had to get up to speed really, really quickly. And it was interesting from the standpoint of identity, because the name of the brand was called See Me Beauty, like SEEME, See Me, because these women felt invisible. Because most of the cosmetics industry is geared toward young women. And so they didn't feel as though they had a voice. Also, just the story of how it came to be. So what happened is that these women were calling up secret customer support, and were like, hey, you guys changed the formula of your deodorant. It's not working anymore. You need to change it back because I'm sweating more and my sweat is more stinky. So you need to change it back because it used to work. Now it doesn't work anymore. And then the customer service folks were like, no, actually, we haven't. But it turns out there's a good reason why you're sweating more and your sweat is more stinky. And that's because that's what happens during menopause. And the women were like, really? Like, yeah, wow. Really? Because menopause is there's this interesting social taboo around it. I mean, it's going to happen to a little more than 50% of the population. Everyone knows it's going to happen. No one says anything.
Right.
And so when it starts to happen, women are like, what the hell is this? Like, this is new. Like, what's going on? So all of a sudden, their beauty routines that they've had literally for the last 20, 30 years don't work anymore because their body chemistry is changing and they don't know how to, they don't know how to cope. And so, anyway, I say all that to say, content marketing for that was fun. It was genuinely fun because some of these, I'm not going to call them old ladies, but some of these women are funny. Like it's just very candid about, how they're feeling and that type of thing. And the ability to, take yourself out of your shoes and put yourself in the perspective of someone whom you're trying to serve, to your point, that will serve you well in business and in life.
Absolutely right. And that's, you run into people that you have to learn about them. You have to engage with them. And they are completely different from you in many different ways. but yet you have to learn to appreciate those differences and then market to them, which I think it creates a lot of empathy for that. And I that's one thing I do love about the digital marketing industry is it has that challenge for people, that it does challenge you to learn about others and your target audiences and get some of those nuances that you normally would never ever understand.
For sure. You said it very, very well, because believe you me, I never thought that I would know so much about menopause. Yet, here we are.
That's okay. That's another show. I'm going to stop there with that because we could go on a whole different tangent there. What I want to talk about from your book, and I loved it, the whole straight out of context is it's not a takedown of Google. Rather, it's this takedown of the attitude that I don't need college, I don't need higher education because everything I need to know is in Google. And I felt you did a great way of presenting this, but presenting this to that, teenager who's not sure where they're going to go. And the voice, the information, and how you presented it, I thought was powerful. And as I said in the intro, right now in our industry, we're seeing a lot of debate about the value of a college education in digital marketing. So I found this to be extremely valuable in two different levels there. Obviously, with your experience. Now, in the book, you talked about how you started down one path of making money, and then you decided to get a degree. What was it that brought you from, I'm making money, I'm doing all this online? You were in the online industry, but what was it that made you realize that I need more, and maybe it's found at a university?
In a word, digital discernment, which is actually two words, but digital discernment is really the main thing that most people lack and think that they have, but they don't. And so what I mean by digital discernment is the ability to both categorize and contextualize online information or digital information. And so, see, what you find online is that it's really the Wild West in terms of the quality of information that you're exposed to. And just because you know how to use Google does not mean that you know how to parse the real from the fake, which is a collective lesson that we all learned after the 2016 U.S. presidential election and the Cambridge Analytica fallout. And so don't worry, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, so we don't have to worry about that. But the point I'm making is that a lot of people got duped, right? A lot of people thought they were getting credible information, and it turns out that they weren't. And so they had no mechanism by which to actually differentiate things. And so there's this old saying, take it with a grain of salt. Well, that assumes you know what salt tastes like, right? And so if you're brand spanking new to an industry, you haven't had your first lick of salt. So you don't know, okay, what am I being presented with? And generally speaking, in a collegiate setting, they have what's called accreditation, meaning that there are certain, checks and balances in place that have to be observed and upheld, or else the institution loses their accreditation. So you typically aren't going to have to worry about any, pyramid schemes or anything like that being pawned off on you in a university setting because it's against the rules. Whereas if you just go to Google, it's no man's land. And there's also this weird social phenomenon that comes with Google where some people feel like they have to have perfect information. And I've actually heard people say there's no excuse not to know anything because you could have just Googled it, which is that's not how that works. That's not how any of that works. Now, Google is a great thing. But what I often tell people is like, okay, think of Google as an information genie, right? It'll give you whatever you ask for, but you have to ask. And it helps if you ask properly. So there's this old Geico commercial. I actually show it in my classes when I teach in the evenings. It's of an old, this, I believe it's from 2014 or something like that. But it starts off the regular way. Did you know Geico can save you, whatever? And then the person's like, everybody knows that. And then they're like, well, did you know genies can be really literal? And so it cuts to a guy and he pulls out a genie and rubs it and the genie pops up. It's like, what do you want? And the guy's like, I want $1 million. And so the genie gives him 1 million male deer. Because that's what a buck is, right? It's a male deer. So we know that what he really wanted, he wanted $1 million. But he didn't want to ask for that either, because if tomorrow $1 million showed up in your bank account and you sell tractors or work at Subway, IRS is going to have some questions. Right. And so what he really wanted is he wanted to hit the Powerball. But you don't want that either, because I don't know about you, but where I'm from, if you on the TV talking about, I just want $100 million, they come to kidnap your mama or snatch one of your babies out of daycare. So you don't want that either. And not only that, most lottery winners go broke after 5 years. So it's not enough to just have the money. You need a degree of financial intelligence to actually keep the money. So what he really wanted is, I want to hit the lottery anonymously, but have the financial education to keep my money. That ain't what he said, though. He said, I want $1 million. And so now he got to figure out what to do with all these deer. You know what I mean? And so that's an extreme and silly example, but that's an example of, Google gives you what you ask for, but you have to ask. So if you don't know something, if something's not in your frame of consciousness yet, because you haven't had a reason to be exposed to it yet, how can you ask for something that you don't know exists? Answer is you can't. It can't be done, because before you can posit the query, you at least have to know what you're asking for. And that's the first chink in the armor. The second one is, I actually had I heard a parent say this before, and I was aghast. A parent told their kid, like, I'm not paying to send you to college for something you can learn on YouTube. And there's a lot wrong with that.
Wow. Yeah.
So again, not going too far down the rabbit hole of the 2016 election, but for those who don't know, YouTube is a search engine. It is actually the second largest search engine behind its parent company, Google. And just generally speaking, all of these algorithms are designed in such a way to keep you on the site for as long as possible, because the longer you're on the site, the more you engage with advertising. The more you engage with advertising, the more money that Facebook, Google, or whoever makes. So that's the general, let's call it the prime directive, right? So what was happening on YouTube is that the algorithm figured out that when you piss someone off, they stay more and they engage more, because they're writing all of these, comments of how enraged they are, and they're sharing and they're doing everything. So YouTube was serving up ever more salacious content, and what was happening, it was radicalizing people. And that was an unintended because from the algorithm's perspective, it's like, look, my job is to keep you here as long as I can. What's going to keep you here for a long time and keep you engaged? Me pissing you off. Okay, here's some more fuel for the fire. And that's what ended up happening. And so, but again, and that's what's called a content bubble, where the algorithms figure out what it is that we have certain proclivities to, and then it serves up more of that. And it keeps out anything that would, disturb our content bubble, because again, from its perspective, it wants you on that site for as long as possible so that you can click on ads.
Yep.
And
Absolutely.
so that's just one of several examples, but I was seeing this going on and I was like, listen, I can't just keep quiet and not address this elephant in the room, because I have small children, and my oldest is 11, my daughter's 7, and my youngest son will be 5 at the end of next month. And one, they have to know that, but more importantly, from a purely selfish point of view, my kids got to pick a wife or a husband out of this bunch. And if ain't none of them went to college, like that's going to be problematic. You know what I mean? So
Oh,
from
no.
purely a self-preservation standpoint, I'm like, no. Hold on, folks. We've crossed the line here. Bring it on back.
No, I think you did a great job because you explain how, yeah, the more you search, the more you use these sites, Google, YouTube, the more the results are going to rely on your history, your behaviors, your interests. And yeah, it creates that content bubble of things that we know you like this, so we're going to give you more. Whereas at the university level, I like to say, in my level with social media, with Google, with YouTube, it's all customized content, custom to me. It's what I want to see. When I go to the university level, well, now it's curated content, curated by either a professor. It's also had to go through rigorous approval process, and it's curriculum. And so it doesn't matter whether I agree with it. It doesn't matter if it's custom to me. It's not for that very purpose. I have to now deal with that. I have to raise my level to understand that content rather than have it customized to my interests. And I agree with this completely. College is where you get your ideas challenged. And I think that's one of the major, I think, unspokens. And like right now, I deal more with, as I'm teaching digital skills, I'm teaching soft skills because that's what a lot of employers are looking for. That I find even in a professional setting, it's the soft skills that are missing. And that's a lot of what college helps you overcome and develop in those people skills of being challenged.
100%. In the book, I talk about the 3 A's, which are the actual benefits of post-secondary education. And you just touched on one of them, which is acumen, right? So when you go to college, you're forced around people who are different than you. And you have to figure that out, especially when they hold positions of authority over you, right? So I had a situation where I had this English teacher and we just hated each other. I don't even remember why we hated each other, but we did not get along. And I got a D in that class. And of course I was out because she graded all of my papers like they were doctoral theses. Like my papers would always come back bloody red with all of these check marks. And it's like, meanwhile, someone who wasn't near as good of a writer would get a B plus. And I'm like, what? I got a D minus and they got a B plus and what? So I went all the way to the dean, and the dean was like, listen, she's tenured. So the only way your grade is getting changed is if she submits a change of grade form, which she's not going to do. So you can take it all the way to the president if you like, but nothing's going to happen. Yeah. And that's analogous to if you're in a company and you run afoul of a VP. And this VP could be a dirtbag, but guess what? They're a VP. And so you're going to have to figure that out. So either you're going to have to transfer to a different division or go to a different company, but that VP ain't going nowhere. And that's adulting. And adulting sometimes isn't fun, but we all have to do it. And so the point I'm making is that, to your point, the fundamentals are still fundamental. Yes, they've changed and you have to apply them in a different context, but they're still there. And so having an understanding of that is a real benefit. And like I said, back when I graduated in 2002, I didn't have anyone in my life at that point who could have steered me in that direction. I was left to just figure it out, which I eventually did. But time is the one commodity that you can't get back. Right? You can get back money. You can get back soybeans and wheat and pork bellies or every other commodity but time. Once that day, week, year is gone, it's gone and you're not getting it back. And it behooves you not to waste your time.
I had to laugh during that story because it reminds me of my college experience where the department head. So I went into journalism because frankly, the internet wasn't around in its modern style. So I went the journalism route, and the department head, I felt like she had it in for me. Because similar to you, I'm getting my papers back, and I'm just like, what's going on? And then I see other people, and I'm looking at their grades. I'm like, come on, I know, I was 10 times better than that. And she mentioned to me once, she's like, I'm grading you based on ability, and you're sliding. Wow. Okay.
Whoa.
And for, and I'm 19, 20, everything. And I'm like, well, wait a minute now. I understand. I get that, but I don't agree with it. My work is still better. And essentially she gave me this, what are you going to do? Type of thing. And that's the thing. I had a challenge. Am I going to oppose, this woman who has earned her position? Am I going to oppose her my entire college career? And part of it was, too, we had some ideological differences, and she was challenging me. And I look back on that, I'm like, how valuable that experience was, because it forced me to look at other opinions, other ideas. I didn't like it at the time, but oh my goodness, the skills that developed and the ability to be questioned. Wow, it was so valuable. So valuable.
Yeah, it's rarely fun, but growth and your comfort zone rarely occupy the same space. So
Very true.
There you have it.
Very true. Absolutely. Well, I love a couple of things that you talked about here, and I thought it was really amazing that, yes, in the digital marketing space, if someone wants to get into this space, there's a high hurdle. And, being in the education side, I've always been aware of that hurdle because, as you were saying, you first saw me on lynda.com, and even being on LinkedIn and some other things, I realized that to access this training, there's a financial hurdle that has to be taken. And it's not an easy hurdle for most
Right.
people to get through. It really presents a big obstacle. And you outlined that especially as well, as far as going to trade shows, which is where the networking takes place. That there's a barrier there that keeps a lot of people out.
100%. And it's one of those open secrets that so just in terms of career trajectory and accessing best in class information, right? So what I say is that there's sort of three paths that most people go down. The first is to just Google it. And there is a lot of great content out there, much of which you can access for free. However, that brings us back to digital discernment. There's also a lot of crap out there that you have to have the ability to parse through, which again, as the 2016 U.S. presidential election showed us, most people don't. And then you have conferences and seminars, but these things are pre-pandemic, pre-pandemic, they were cost prohibitively expensive. So I believe the example I used was Content Marketing World, which shout out to Joe Palizzi, former guest on my show, met him at Content Marketing World 2019. Super nice guy, just a wealth of information. But, Content Marketing World, $1,600 just to get through the door. That does not include your flight, your hotel, Uber back and forth for however many days, depending where you're flying from, because there were people from all over the world flying for Content Marketing World because it's the premier content marketing conference. So you have folks from Europe and India and all over the place flying, and so once you add all of that back in, you're looking at $3,000 to $5,000 per person. And the open secret there is that almost nobody pays for that out of pocket. You're there on the company's dime. So when I went with my colleague, we were there on Acco Brand's dime. Now we had to implement what we learned because we had to say beforehand, I want to go to this. I'm going to be on this track. I'm going to see these sessions, and this is how this is going to help our e-commerce business, or this is going to help retention and blah, blah, blah. And then when I came back from the conference, I actually had to do that, right? But So you find yourself in an interesting catch-22 where in order to get the job, I have to have the best in class information, but in order to get the best in class information, I already have to have a job to send me to the conference in the first place. And just the serendipity of being in a shared space of, grabbing a cocktail and bumping into somebody, or, hey, I've seen you in 2 other sessions. We appear to be on the same track. What are you into? Or what did you get from this speaker? This is what I got from it. Did you get that too? That sort of thing. That's very difficult to replicate online. I mean, folks have been putting up a good effort, but there's nothing about actually being in the room with someone, and you can call it the energy, the feng shui, whatever you want to call it, but it hit different. You know what I mean? When you're actually in the space. And then, I got tired of hitting my head against those paywalls. And so finally what I did is I found an accredited degree program, like you said, that actually has checks and balances and rigor and all of that good stuff. And that's the route that I chose because, like I said, for a decade, because I'm no quitter, but like for a solid decade, I just kept running into the same thing. There, you can get a little bit of information, you can get a nugget here, a piece there, but it's never enough to get the whole enchilada. If you want the whole enchilada, that'll be $10,000 because typically at these things, there's this, VIP coaching, one-on-one training, white glove service, whatever you want to call it. And, that's the consultancy side of it. And that's upwards of $10,000 a month. And so again, you already have to have a job to be able to foot that in most cases. And that's the part that doesn't get talked about, or at least it doesn't get talked about enough, which is, access to capital. And there are 9 forms of capital. Money is just one of them, but, it is something that you have to figure out. And so whenever we talk about post-secondary education, the conversation typically steers toward student loan debt, which is a issue. I'm not trying to downplay that or say that it's not an issue, but what I am saying is that for myself, I don't begrudge my student loans because without them, I would not be in the position that I'm in now, where this is my second book that I've written. I've worked for some of the largest companies and brands in the world, networked and went to conferences with people like yourself. I'm on your podcast, as well as when I had my own podcast, I had, all of the folks that we tend to run with, your Jason Falls, your Jay Bear, your all of these folks on my show. And I teach now. I'm an adjunct instructor. Just started that. I'm loving it. So I teach in the evenings. My home university is Old Dominion in Virginia, but I've also taught classes for the University of Wisconsin at Madison, as well as Loyola University, New Orleans. And so, yeah, I'm not mad at my student loans. And if I'm mad at anything, I'm mad that it took me, I spent a decade banging my head against the wall before I figured out, okay, well, let me stop smashing my skull against this thing and go another route. Because had I did that off break, our shared friends, Will Reynolds, Seer Interactive, Brian Fanzo, Mike King of I Pull Rank, Carlos Gill. I'm the same age as these people. Within a year or so, right? Like Carlos is like a year older than me, but I'm age mates with them. But their career trajectory looks very different than mine because they got certain skill sets when I was busy chasing a buck, because frankly, I didn't know any better. And so I'm trying to save anybody coming up behind me a little bit of turmoil and, pass on what little wisdom I do have.
If you've always wanted to try meditation but think to yourself, when would I have time? You should check out Headspace. Headspace is your daily dose of mindfulness in the form of guided meditations in an easy-to-use app. Headspace is one of the only apps advancing the field of mindfulness and meditation through comprehensive, clinically validated research. Headspace really can help you feel better. Overwhelmed? Headspace has a 3-minute SOS meditation. Need help falling asleep? Use Headspace wind down sessions. And parents, Headspace has morning meditations you can do with your kids. Headspace works for you, on your schedule, anytime, anywhere. Headspace is meditation made simple. Go to headspace.com/C-Suite for a free 1-month trial. You'll be able to access Headspace's full library of meditations for every situation. This is the best deal offered right now. Head to headspace.com/C-Suite today.
If you are a regular listener of Endless Coffee Cup, well, you know I love coffee. If you are listening for the first time, then the name of the podcast should be a big clue. I love conversation, and I think that we have a lot to learn from each other if we only take the time to sit and talk over a cup of coffee. Maybe we'll come to a resolution, maybe not, but at least we've learned from each other. It's in this spirit that I'm happy to announce a regular sponsor of the Endless Coffee Cup, a coffee sponsor. In Care of Coffee is a coffee company that is unique in the market. They are directly tied to the communities that produce coffee and ensure that the proceeds go to the coffee farmers, the local producers, and their communities. There are no middlemen or markups. The proceeds from the sales go directly to the communities that work so hard to bring us the enjoyment of a great cup of coffee. Go to incareofcoffee.com, follow the link in the notes, and use the code ENDLESS to get 10% off your order. Again, that's the discount code ENDLESS to get 10% off your order. I'm enjoying the whole bean Wewe Tenango coffee today. Please support our sponsor and know that your support goes directly to the farmers, producers, and communities that help power us here at the Endless Coffee Cup podcast. Well, and I think that's a danger that, there's this mentality that I can just go online, I'll start a business. And in doing so, you expose yourself, and you had mentioned this earlier, you expose yourself to every scheme that's out there. And you don't have that discernment to know it's a scheme. Everything sounds great. Everything is full of promises. And I see this so much, especially in our industry, that even smart people tend to get taken in by, I would say, some of the studies that are done because they don't understand, well, wait a minute, that's an extremely limited data set. You're only polling your own customers, your only mailing list, which doesn't create a generalized, statement that you can make about everybody. Without those tools of how to discern the information, man, you can get taken in on so many different levels.
Yeah, to describe me as green when I first started doesn't quite say it. I was damn near Namekian. I was so green. If you watch Dragon Ball Z and Piccolo, I was Piccolo's cousin. I was so green. And there has to be a level of care and responsibility because you can learn some bad habits that you're not aware that you're learning. So in one of my classes, in the particular evening, we were going over landing pages. And I had a student. The student actually said to me, he said this to me. He's like, well, I've never seen a landing page before. And I was like, yes, of course you have. That's how you got here. and it was like, what? It was like, yeah, you were on Facebook or somewhere else. You saw an ad. You clicked it. It took you to a landing page. You entered your information. And then someone from admissions contacted you. Like, that's what happened, right? He's like, oh, yeah, that is how that happened. That was an ad? Oh, you know what I mean? And so and I'm not saying this to, make jest of him, but I'm just bringing this as an example that, this was an older guy, but it's like he had no clue that he had gotten in this very class learning about landing pages from a landing page. And not everybody, like I said, because of the lack of accreditation in the space, and it's the Wild West, and all you need is a landing page, some copy, and boom, you're a digital marketer. You have varying degrees of folks out here schlepping information. And this is not to say that all of them are bad. Some of them are very, very good, but the ethics vary widely.
Oh.
And that's something, again, you don't have to worry about at a university setting because, and maybe this isn't the best example, but let's say, you're a young person you're a 15, 16-year-old boy, and it's that time you're getting into puberty and you're starting to get interested in the fairer sex, but your father's not around for whatever reason. And so you might learn how to talk to girls from a pimp. Now, if your objective is to, reach that milestone, let's just say that we all reach at some point during adulthood, a pimp can show you how to do that. But you're also going to learn a bunch of bad habits along the way that you're not necessarily going to identify as such at the time. Because in every class, and I'm sure you have these folks too, when it's time for Q&A and you're talking about SEO and PPC, you have some students that are black hats, but don't know that they're black hats because no one has ever told them, hey, that's black hat. And I say that with a bunch of empathy because that was me. Like, I got a hold of some quote unquote courses and all of this stuff. And at the time, from my perspective, I was just learning the game from somebody who knew the game. It did not occur to me that keyword stuffing and URL spoofing and all of these other things that have gone the way of the dinosaur, as well they should have, it did not occur to me at the time that this was cheating or this wasn't above board, because I got a bad guru who was like, hey, you want to learn how to make money? I know how to make money. I'll teach you how to make money. Here's how we make money. And because the guru